Welcome, everybody. So yeah, we're today, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you guys are at. Thanks for joining. We're going to focus today primarily on Wattbox, but OvrC is always a big component of the Wattbox ecosystem. So a slight OvrC intro with really more talking about how Wattbox integrates for those that aren't using it today. Talk about some things that might be new for some of you guys that haven't been there, but really it's a refocus on some of those core features of the Wattbox ecosystem and what those really mean for you guys. So before we get rolling, a couple things. If you can't hear me right now, you probably don't know what I'm saying. But for those that may be looking at this screen, having audio problems, in your bottom left-hand corner, that panel there in Zoom, you can test your audio and make sure you have the right speaker or microphone selected within there. But more importantly, you don't have the ability to ask questions with a speaker. You will have to submit those questions with the Q&A option there in the bottom panel of your Zoom options there. So I encourage you guys, ask questions. That's how these things roll. We want to have a great Q&A session. I want to make sure that the things you guys want to hear, you guys want to hear me talk about, you submit. So once you select that Q&A option on there at the bottom, you can submit questions. If you want to submit it anonymously, you can. But I would love to see you want to comment on my shirt, you want to comment on the background behind me, whatever it may be, guys. Submit those questions. That's how we drive the conversation. I have plenty that I want to talk about, but it's not the only thing that's important. There's plenty of things you guys want to hear and discuss as well. So please, if you guys have those questions, submit those. It will make things roll appropriately here. So for those that don't know me, I've seen a few names that I already recognize. Gary kind of gave a little bit of a brief intro, but my name is Derek Webb. I am one of the technical trainers, instructors here at SnapAV. I have been with SnapAV now just over 8 years. I started in tech support way back in 2012. And we just so happened to release the very first IP Wattbox that year that I started. So I've been here just over 8 years, and I moved from tech support into the training role about 3 years ago. And so today I focus on everything from training on OvrC Wattbox, networking, surveillance, as well as I run our automation programmer class for Control4 certification once a month as well. So I touch everything, I interact with everything. That's why I encourage you guys to ask those questions, because this is what I do, and I really, really like to have that interaction. And so one more thing before we get rolling today is Gary did mention for a second, and some of you guys that may have come early, I don't have a slide for it or anything, but the second week in October, we are having our virtual, if you will, CDF substitute, Snap Pro Live, which is our virtual trade show, if you will. We're going to have some great product announcements. We're going to have a lot of really, really good training sessions. I want to say a lot. I'm talking about 30, 40 different training classes that we're going to be offering in there. Like I said, product announcements. We're going to have Ask the Expert session. So I'm actually running 3 different Ask the Expert sessions on Control4 and integration, surveillance and integration with your control systems. I'll have one of our Control4 experts on there with me as well. So that's the second week of October. You guys sign up if you haven't for Snap Pro Live. You can do so at snapav.com. If you guys haven't signed up, we're gonna have a lot of really great stuff. Some recorded,
if I can interject, Derek, you guys, when you sign up for that, you sign up for the whole package, basically. You go through the portal, and then you'll be able to see the whole agenda categorically. You'll be able to sign up and put in your calendars what you guys want to join into all week long. So it's just one sign-up process. Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Gary. So that's my quick spiel on what's coming up, guys. But let's get into the content today. So we are going to be focused on, like I said, slight intro for those that may not be super familiar with OvrC. Hopefully most of you are, but if not, we'll give you a quick little intro, but really focus on power management and IP power management to be specific. That's the biggest piece. That's what's the most important. That's what I want to focus on today. So I've been kind of switching up how I present some of these things to you guys. And what I've been trying to focus on is what are my top 5 features that I love about a product? So specifically today's Wattbox, what are the top 5 things that I love about this thing? Because we found that a lot of you guys really appreciate the insight that not just myself, but a lot of us from SnapAV have on our products and how we like to integrate them. What do we hear from different dealers in terms of what do they like the best? That really feeds into what we like the best. So I'll go through kind of all of these as we go through today. But those top 5 that I really, really enjoy and really make this thing stand out for me are obviously OvrC integration first and foremost. That's what changed the game. That's what makes Wattbox what it is, bar none, right? The auto reboot feature is, I think, a feature that gets slept on. More people are kind of coming back to it, but it's an important one. The ability to schedule reboots either as a recurring reboot or a one-time reboot into the future. Having multiple options, that's something that's new for us with Wattbox in the last year or so, is giving you multiple form factors and multiple mounting options, allowing you to get a product power, and for that matter, controllable power, anywhere on that job site in different sizes, shapes, or whatever it may be. And the last feature there is having that advanced UPS integration to give battery backup, the OvrC experience to allow you to get those types of things in the cloud for access when power is out, not just when you have power, to give you some really cool things there. So real quick, for those that don't know what OvrC is, like I said, this is not going to be an OvrC training today. We are going to just be focusing on the Wattbox side, but I wanted to just give an intro for some of you guys that may not know what OvrC is. It's important for us to kind of talk through that for those of you guys that may not know. So if you aren't familiar with OvrC, OvrC is our cloud management platform. It focuses on all Snap AV products that have a network port, right? Whether it be a Rackness networking products, routers, switches, access points, our Wattbox line of IP power, binary with our MOIP platform, our video over IP solution with MOIP, and it could be our Luma surveillance platform with IP cameras and recorders, episode IP amplifiers, our Sunbright TVs as well. OvrC is embedded into all of our products. There's a little OvrC icon you really can't see on my screen, on my image. You can see a little OvrC icon there that lets you know that OvrC is embedded. What that means with OvrC native integration here on the left-hand side, you buy that product, it has OvrC out of the box. Nothing else you have to do to pay for, to make it OvrC ready. Nothing else you have to do to allow this thing to be OvrC ready. It is. You buy the hardware, you get OvrC. It's a big piece. That's what we're going to be focusing on all today. Wattbox is a native OvrC product. Every OvrC feature you see, you get for free when you buy the product. It's important for us to give you that value add. It's a big deal. The next piece, which really is emphasized with the Wattbox platform, is OvrC Home. It's taking some of the control that you get as a dealer, that you have to make your clients' lives better, and giving a little bit of that back to your clients. It's taking what you get as the integrator and giving it back to your clients, allow them to do some of their own types of troubleshooting and fixing. A lot of times the client wants to feel empowered. They don't want to feel like they're helpless, that they paid a lot of money and they can't fix anything. They have to call you every single time and they have to pay you to come out. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a burden on the client that they have to ask you for help. And sometimes they don't ask you for help because they're afraid you're going to charge them. And then that leads to a scenario where they've had something broken for 6 months. They didn't tell you about it. They got fed up and ripped it out or called someone else to come in and replace it. You just don't want that. OvrC Home is about getting past some of those types of challenges. It's an end user facing app on their phones, their tablets, that give them access to solve their specific issues. You create the experience, you allow them access to what they need to control, what they need to do, and you still control that. So we'll talk more about OvrC Home a little bit. I'll show you guys some demos, some examples that are there for you guys as well. And then the last thing in there, which we're not going to focus on today, is OvrC Pro. OvrC Pro is enabling you guys access to control and manage other third-party products out there in the ecosystem, not just Snap AV products, but other third-party products, right? Whether it be Netgear, Roku, Samsung IPTVs, pretty much every audio video receiver, Denon, Yamaha, Marantz, Pioneer, Onkyo, Integra, across the board, adding things in like protocol enhancements for SNMP and OnVIF. The list goes on in terms of what OvrC Pro can do. So 3 buckets. OvrC Pro might cost you money depending on what products you buy from us, but we're going to focus on these 2 here today. OvrC Home and native OvrC integration in terms of what those mean for you guys. And like I said, guys, if you have those questions, please submit them in the Q&A. There is a chat feature, but I don't look at that as often. It's harder for me to track. So if you guys have those questions, please submit those in the Q&A option down there in the bottom of your Zooms. So, like I said, guys, our goal today is to focus on the Wattbox product line. As I mentioned before, Wattbox, it launched in December of 2012 as an IP product line. We had it out as non-IP for a little while, but it really kind of took off, and December of 2012 was an IP product line. And when it first came out, there was no OvrC, there was no cloud ecosystem. It was the old school IP interface you had to log into via web browser with an IP address. And if you wanted remote access, you had to set up port forwarding, dynamic DNS to get access. Works great. There were some killer features we'll focus on here in a little bit that are still around today. But the whole idea of IP Wattbox and IP power in general is to solve the most important problem you guys have, which is truck rolls. 80% of your tech support calls are usually solved via power cycle, right? It is pulling power on that product, pressing a reboot button, whatever it may be. If 80% of those problems can be solved without having to roll a truck, or if even 60% of those problems can be solved without having to roll a truck, then that's a lot of money back in your pocket, a lot of time back in your days to be spent making money, to allow you guys to do more jobs, to see more customers, right, install more products, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, if you can solve a problem with a simple power cycle without having to roll a truck, your life becomes easier after that. So Wattbox, all about that. So one of the biggest things we've been focusing on more recently is giving you guys, remember that was my number 4 kind of top feature there, is multiple form factors, multiple mounting options, giving you a Wattbox that can fit any job. In the original days of Wattbox, it was all about having a single Wattbox to go on that rack. As long as we can get that rack up to par, then you should be good to go in solving a lot of your problems. But at the end of the day, a lot of your jobs are starting to spread beyond the rack because there's so many products that you want to put in room that make sense, because all these IoT smart devices, while it's great to have those IoT smart devices, they're some of the most notorious devices for causing challenges in your networks. And so a lot of times a simple reboot fixes that. And so our goal is to give you more Wattbox options to fit all across that job site. So I want to go through those options and what those mean to really kind of hammer down the feature sets that you see there. The biggest thing is when you talk about our first line of power products is our feature sets are very similar when you talk about the different form factors. We do our best not to remove features, add and remove when you go to different models. Now there's some exceptions to that, but we do our best to keep it very consistent so you don't have to worry about mixing and matching and missing out on some of those feature sets. So the first really kind of line that we talk about there is our line of IP power strips. They look like your traditional power strip that you guys are used to using in the old days, but these are OvrC enabled, IP enabled power strips in 6, 12, and 18 outlet versions. These are really, really important products, guys, because they have the form factor, they have the size of your traditional power strip, but they're giving you all the control that you would expect with a traditional IP Wattbox. That's 6, 12, 18 outlets of individual IP control, no banks. We're not cutting off control of certain outlets, individual control across the board, auto reboot functionality built in, surge protection built in, live power metering, power monitoring built in. The larger units have isolated filter banks built in. These are powerful products, guys, in the smallest form factor possible when it comes to IP power control on your job sites, right? You'll see this is our 12 outlet here in the side of your rack. These things allow you tons of flexibility to get these guys on the back of your racks, the side of your racks. You'll see how they can mount inside the rails, on the back of the rails, you name it, right? These guys are flexible in where they sit. We've done our best to space the outlets out so you can fit multiple wall warts in these guys as well. And my favorite piece of these IP controllable power strips is our 6 outlet version. Our 6 outlet version is such a problem solver. I'll talk about some more smaller versions here in a second, but this 6 outlet is so great, right? It can obviously fit in the side of your rack. You could put one at the top of your 42U rack on the inside of the rails, one at the bottom of those rails. Speaking of the rack, you can also mount in a 1U space on that rack as well. That's a 6 outlet IP controllable 1U Wattbox now. That's awesome. There's no depth to it. So this thing can fit anywhere on your rack as long as you have a 1U space. You don't have to worry about it cramping or anything like that. That's awesome. You can, obviously, as you see there, you can even space that thing a little bit further back so the wall warts aren't kind of sticking out the back of the rack wherever you need to in those scenarios. You can mount this in any of our structured wiring cans. You see this example here. We mounted it right on the inside to give you more outlets if that makes more sense for you. Obviously, it can still be put on a desk, whatever it makes sense. You can mount this thing to a wall. This is a problem solver, guys. 6 outlets of IP control anywhere you need that this thing can fit. I love the 6 outlet IP controllable power strip. So our power strips are powerful. No pun intended there, guys. There's so many features, so many options there when we talk about this guy. It gives you tons of flexibility. I'll go into some of those examples, some of those demos here in a second of what this thing looks like in OvrC and talk about that here soon. The next line that we really kind of call it is our IP power controllers. I call it that because there's a lot of kind of different form factors that are unique that, you know, some are rack mountable, some aren't, but they're really, the whole idea is it's an IP power controller. It's a surge protector. It is allows you to have more outlets. It allows you to do all these things, but ultimately it's a controller. It's controlling the power of devices plugged into it. So these guys come in multiple sizes and form factors, 2, 3, 5, and 12 outlet versions. That's a big deal. That is giving you a lot of different options and opportunities there. All have OvrC embedded. All have individual IP control over the outlets, except for one. I'll explain that one in a second. All support auto reboot. All support surge protection on all but one. And most have individual power metering as well. So these guys, like I said, multiple form factors, multiple options here. Let's talk about a few of those and what those look like. So that 2 outlet that I talked about there, the 2 and the 3 outlet, those are our newest addition to the Wattbox family. That is our 2 outlet and 3 outlet ultra compact Wattbox. These are the ultimate problem solvers. As much as I love that 6 outlet that we talked about a second ago, this guy is powerful. We have a 2 outlet, sorry, not a 3 outlet. We have a 2 outlet non-surge protection, like you see here on the screen right now, and we have a 2 outlet with surge protection. They are both very similar in terms of what they do. One is just slightly longer than the other. So while you see this one is about 6 inches long, the one with surge protection is about 10 inches, 8 inches long. Don't quote me on those links, but that's about where they're at. One has surge protection and individual control over each of the 2 outlets. The one you see here pictured, the one I have in my hand, 2 outlets, no surge protection. But the biggest thing here is these are Wi-Fi enabled Wattboxes. So you can put this Wattbox anywhere on the job site and connect it to Wi-Fi, and you have IP control anywhere, right? You can't get that, that cable there for that normal Wattbox to go in there. It can still be plugged in via Ethernet if you would like, but anywhere on that job site, you can put one of these guys and connect to Wi-Fi, and you have IP control over whatever's going in there. This thing is the ultimate problem solver. I tell guys, you should keep 5 of these things on the truck at all times. Keep it in the van, keep it in the truck, because when you roll a truck to that job site for the 4th time to solve that issue, and because you're having to go for the 4th time, you're probably not charging the client anymore because you feel bad. They're complaining about you have to keep charging for your install. So you're probably losing money by that point. Rather than lose money, install one of these guys. I think these things are like 80 bucks a year cost. They are, it makes sense to go ahead and deploy these things and save the money, save the time. You know you have those pesky products on that job site, put one of these behind it. To build upon that, and this is a global thing about Wattbox, these are your new smart outlets, right? If you're using OvrC, you might as well be deploying these things as your smart outlets for your control systems. Free drivers available for all of our Wattbox products, right? Doesn't matter the size, as long as it's IP controllable, we have drivers available for all of your control systems. Control 4, Crestron, RTI, URC, Savant, Elan, you name it, right? We also have an open API protocol, so if you want to make your own driver, you can do that as well. We want to make sure that you guys can control these things. They are flexible, and they go anywhere on those job sites. Ultra compact, 2 different versions, one with surge protection and a bank of control, so both outlets are controlled together. One, I think I said one without that gives the bank of control, one with surge protection that gives you individual control of those outlets. Every other feature set is the same in terms of how these things function. They are awesome products, guys. They make your life so much easier. And then we have a couple of other options in this power controller line. We have our standard 12 outlet that mounts in your racks. I kind of showed you guys that example on this screen already. Our standard 12 outlet that mounts in your racks, we just released an updated version of that unit that gives it a new look, some new features with power metering and power monitoring as well that allow you to see some more live information. Feature set still very similar, but a couple of those features that you see. And then we have products like our this is, you could say a legacy. It's just a tried and true, our WB300 VersaBox version that allows you to drop your Wattbox into one of our VersaBoxes. If you aren't familiar with our VersaBox, the super quick bird's eye view, it is an in-wall box that strategically mounts behind your TV in conjunction with your TV mount to allow you to get more products behind that TV so that you can not have to use double-sided sticky tape and Velcro. It makes your life better to have more access, more space behind that TV. The problem is you need to get power behind that TV. That's what this box does, is it drops into that VersaBox in the wall behind your TV and gives you more IP power in a very strategic way. None of these are meant to replace the other. They're all meant to complement each other, right? Maybe you don't have space for this, and so you need this. Maybe you don't have space for any of these, or maybe you have extra space, so you want to use the 6-outlet version. These are all complements to each other. Whatever the need is on your job site, that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to give you those sizes, those form factors to really, really focus and accomplish some of those goals you guys might have on those jobs. So those are the kind of global ideas there of the different power controllers. If you guys have hardware-specific questions, please submit those in the Q&A. I see some questions here already coming through, so I will definitely touch on some of these here in just a few minutes when we get into some of the live demo Q&A session here. So those are the specifics there when we talk about the different options from our power strips and our power controllers that you see there. The last thing I want to emphasize, and this was kind of part 5 in my example, is our OvrC enabled UPS, our uninterruptible power supplies. We have non-OvrC enabled UPSs. They're dumb UPSs, they're just battery backups. There's not a lot of control, not a lot of smarts around them, but they work if all you need is the basics there. We then have units that allow you to pair that UPS with your IP Wattbox. So almost all of our IP Wattboxes have this functionality. Our ultra compact versions, they don't have the ability to pair with the UPS, but every other one does. You will see on these units a little orange port on them, and it says UPS link on that orange port. You will see a similar connection on our UPSs that are OvrC enabled as well. You can see one connected right here. Once you connect that orange port together from the UPS to the Wattbox now becomes the brains of the operation. It becomes the controller for the UPS. The UPS essentially becomes a big battery, but your Wattbox now is inheriting the powers, if you will, of that battery. So what that means is it doesn't mean that if you have a 12 outlet or an 18 outlet Wattbox that you have to use all of those on that UPS. You can disable certain ports from having access to certain outlets on the Wattbox, right? Or from the battery. So I can say if I have an 18 outlet Wattbox, for example, and I connect that to my 2200 VA UPS, it's a lot of battery, but still it's a lot of outlets. I can say that I only want to have outlets, 1 through 6 on that UPS. Every other one, if it goes into battery backup mode, I'm turning those outlets off. They're no longer a part of it. And then I can say, from there, if I go into battery backup mode, I want to start to utilize my intelligent load shedding, right? I want to be able to say that at 75% battery, let's knock off outlets 5 and 6. At 50%, let's do 3 and 4. Let's maintain power on outlets 1 and 2, my modem, my router, as long as possible, right? And the cool thing here is that because these are OvrC enabled, you've linked it into your Wattbox. When power goes out, you can be notified about that. You can see that. You can get that information. That's insight you never had before, because the network most likely is the part of the system you're keeping online with that battery. So OvrC integration with our UPS is a big deal. It is a two-part process, though. You need the UPS and you need the Wattbox. We sell them apart. We also sell them as pairs if you want to buy it as a kit. But it requires both. It's a link from the Wattbox to the UPS to make that UPS smart. Just want to be kind of clear and clarify that for you guys as we kind of talk about those things. So I have already talked about a couple of my things I like the most, right? I've discussed slightly about OvrC. We'll go into more of that here in a second. I've talked about all the different form factors you guys have access to and our UPS integration. Those are all some big features that I love to talk about when we really, introduce this Wattbox ecosystem. But really the last half of what I want to talk about, guys, is I want to get in some hands-on. I want to show you guys the Wattbox ecosystem. I want to demo the setup of things like auto reboot scheduling, and things like that. I want to just show you guys what that stuff looks like and get some hands-on. So I'm already seeing some questions. So as I'm getting this up, I want to answer some of those questions as well. So first one I see is from Robert about, is there an OvrC training coming up? So Robert, we did an OvrC training a month or two ago, I believe. I know that I think we have another one scheduled before the end of the year. So I encourage you, if you get a chance, check the recordings. I think Gary has those on the Volumetone YouTube page. But stay tuned as well. We'll probably have some more OvrC training coming up. But you will also see OvrC training at Snap Pro Live. I think we have 2 advanced training sessions from my education team. We also have some sales-based sessions in OvrC. We have a lot of OvrC training coming up. So if it's not through Volumetone or through AllNet, Custom Plus, or MRI, always feel like you can go to snapav.com and check that out, or to Snap Pro Live. So I see it real quick from Bob. What extra capabilities, if any, do I get if I add an OvrC Pro module to a device that already has OvrC built in? So that's one of the beauties of what we've tried to accomplish with the OvrC ecosystem there, Bob, is not many at all. The biggest thing that you might get for devices that already have OvrC built in is you now get a dashboard that gives you some networks. But for Wattbox, for example, everything we're going to talk about today, you get when you buy the product. There is no reason that you should buy OvrC Pro to add to your Wattbox. Now, there's other things OvrC Pro will give you, but it's not going to enhance your Wattbox experience at the end of the day. Feel like with Wattbox, if that's what you want to deploy by itself, you're going to get the full experience no matter what. So that's a great question. So I see your question, Steve, about feedback from the two-port Wi-Fi Wattbox to the Crestron system. What I asked is you clarify. Are you looking to see outlet state? Because it should give you the outlet state. It's a two-way, as long as the driver is written as a two-way communication there. I don't know for sure how that driver is written, but it should give you the state in that process. But if there's more you're looking for, let me know. But the driver should be written for that. And if it's not, I can see, I think we may have written that driver in-house, but I can see and I can ask those guys for sure if that is the case. So Todd, any plans for a Wattbox OvrC electrical receptacle? Sure would be nice. I agree. That's a great idea. I encourage you guys that have some of those thoughts like that as well. Join our open answer sessions at Snap Pro Live. The guys that are developing this will be on there. That's one of the requests we've had for quite some time, to have an in-wall version. It's a thought. We'll see what happens. Vincent, love to hear it. Always like to hear examples of when this thing works. Vincent deployed the IP-enabled ultra-compact Wattbox behind several jobs with large screen TVs. It's exactly the idea, especially if you're going to a job site that's already there. It is the ultimate retrofit solution for Wattbox. So Dean, great question. If the customer loses internet, is there an auto power off and on function? That's exactly where I wanted to transition to next. I see more questions here, so guys, we'll get back to some of those questions. I wanted to answer a few, and then jump in as well to some of the stuff that we see. So the first thing is kind of my number 2 feature there with Wattbox is auto reboot, and this pairs in with OvrC. So what you guys see here right now is my OvrC interface. I'm going to go to my device list for my house here, and I'm going to go to my 12 outlet IP controlled Wattbox. This is our new WB800 IPVM12. This unit, as you see, it loaded quickly. I see all of my devices here right away that are plugged in. I have already named all my outlets, so I know where this is. This is the Wattbox that sits on my desk right next to me. It allows me to get all of the controls through everything and then control all the stuff I have plugged in. I have a lot of stuff that I kind of mix and match in here. So I have control right away to reboot, power on and off my outlets. I'm getting that live feedback over the current amperage and wattage draw from each of my outlets. As you see, my monitors, they draw some pretty good wattage. The computer I'm currently using, I get that wattage draw as well. As you see, pulling 115 watts right this second. I get global information around amperage and wattage draw. A configuration here at the top. So let's talk about auto reboot. Auto reboot is the ability, it was the original killer feature when we talk about Wattbox. And it is, hey, my client, we always get, someone in the early days when we were introducing this product that would like to speak up and, chuckle. Hey, well, if there's no internet, how's OvrC going to work? Today, OvrC does require internet. We're hoping to change that one day, but today it does require internet for it to function. So with that being said, what do you do if there is no internet in the home, right? How do you fix that? That usually requires a truck roll. Auto reboot was our solution to that. The way auto reboot works is it is pinging a group of websites or local IP addresses, and based off those ping attempts, those attempts to reach that website, that IP address, if it fails for a certain amount of time, we want to tell the Wattbox to reboot a specific 1, 2, 3, any number of outlets based off those attempts. Because if we say, hey, I cannot reach google.com and yahoo.com and amazon.com, I've probably lost internet. I probably need to do something about that. So the process for setting this up, guys, is you set your websites, and if you want a local IP address, I'll come back to the local IP address in a second. Let's just focus on, we have our 3 websites. By default, these are the 3 we add. I set my websites. I can test my ability to ping those websites as well to make sure it's a good website. I have the name in there right. I save that information. I then move into my outlet reboot settings here. What I'm saying is I'm going outlet by outlet, and I'm setting a logic for when that outlet may or may not reboot. So let's take this first example, my left Dell monitor. Let's imagine that's my router, for example. This outlet, I'm going to say that it is going to enter into an auto reboot state when all of the selected host timeouts or any of the selected host timeout. I encourage you guys, use all. What that's saying is that ping 1, ping 2, and ping 3 all have to time out for this outlet to enter into an auto reboot state. If I selected any of those 3 would have to time out. So what if one of those goes down? What if, for some reason Amazon had a catastrophic failure and the website went down? Well, my auto reboot on this Wattbox would see that as it's offline, and it would try to reboot it. So use all for those to make your system foolproof. So you select all selected hosts. You select the host you want to be part of this outlet reboot logic, and then you have to set the actual timeout logic around that. What this is saying is we need to categorize what is a timeout. And so in this example, I'm saying that this outlet this logic, it has to time out. It has to fail to reach all 3 of those websites for 5 seconds, 5 times in a row. So your timeout interval is how long does it have to fail to reach it before it categorizes that as a timeout. And then how many times do I have to have consecutive timeouts for that to happen as well? So 5 times, 5 times in a row. So really that's 25 seconds total for that to be considered a timeout. Because sometimes if you're having intermittent network issues, you could have a timeout for 20 seconds and then come back for 5 minutes and then so on and so forth. We want to make sure it's a true outage before we give that reboot. So this is an example of 25 seconds. I recommend around 300 seconds, close to 5 minutes for this type of thing, but you mix and match based off what your client expects. You don't want to have too short, too sensitive of a timeout window, because sometimes your client might have a timeout that lasts 60 seconds that doesn't really need a reboot. It's the longer timeouts that really require that reboot. So that's why we have that in place there. So that's your timeout settings, your timeout logic. Then we have some delay options here to help you make this thing foolproof, right? A connection test delay. So this is going to say that after an auto reboot, I'm going to wait 15 minutes before I start trying to test for auto reboot logic again. Again, if there's an extended outage on that job site, you don't want it to immediately start testing right when the system comes back up online. That gets you into an unwanted loop. So we're going to wait for 15 minutes with this setting before I try again. And I'm going to try to reboot 5 times. So it's 5 times spaced 15 minutes apart based off this logic. If after 5 attempts to do an auto reboot, my system is still not back online, I'm going to default to on. And then once the system can accept or see an internet connection again, it can start to ping those websites again, it will re-enable auto reboot. So after 5 attempts, it turns off auto reboot, leaves the system on, and will then re-enable once network is then detected again. If you set this to 0, it will try and reboot till the end of time until network is sensed again, and then it will stop. That's your logic. So what you're doing is you are setting your websites, your host, telling what outlets you want to be a part of those hosts you just created, and then putting in logic timeout settings for how long you want to categorize what an auto reboot is. I recommend this for a lot of your jobs, especially some of those more rural ones. A truck roll might take 3 or 4 hours to get there. It's auto tech support, guys. It's doing it for you. You can always go back after the fact and look in your activity log for when this is occurring to see what's going on. You can see when your hosts are failing as well. At the end of the day, auto reboot is automatic tech support. It saves you guys time and money. Does it make sense for every single job site? Maybe not. But you know which customers you would like to have this. You know which customers have some of those network issues that you really need to put in place. You can also set up auto reboot for local IP devices. The caveat I will give you this here, guys, is you do not want to use local IP devices as your network reset, right? So I don't want to ping Google, Yahoo, and Amazon and my router or my Control4 system, because there's a good chance if the internet is down, my router is probably not offline. It's still working locally. So if I have that as a part of my logic, my system will never reboot. Use your local IP devices as one-off specific devices. Maybe I have my Control4 processor on outlet 12, and I want to ping that. If I lose communication with outlet 12, right, just that outlet for that set amount of time we have, that means the system is locked up and it's not working the way it should. Let's go ahead and reboot just that outlet. Use local IP devices as kind of a one-to-one relationship, but it's a great way for some of those things that love to lock up. Now, if that lockup isn't network related, then that's a different story, right? That's why we have the on-demand reboots when those come into play. But if it is a network related lockup, you can use our IP-enabled kind of auto reboot here to solve those for those local network issues as well. Auto reboot is a phenomenal feature. It solves you guys a ton of time. One other thing I want to point out here on the screen is our outlet options under configure. Outlet options, you already saw, I talked about it. It's where I can name my outlets that I have where my devices are plugged in. I can set my power on delays. So when I do have the auto reboot occur, it will power on my outlets at the time that I say. Every timer starts at 0. So the sequence is at, unit power's on, 1 second later, outlet 1, 2 seconds after power on, 3 seconds after power on, 4, 5, 30 seconds after power on. I set that one custom, so on and so forth down the line. So when you set those, just remember everything starts at 0. Then we have our outlet mode here. Outlet mode is a great feature. This is a oops, don't screw up type of feature. Enabled, disabled, network device, reset only. Everything by default is set to enabled. Your mission critical, your network devices in your network, you should set those to network device reset only. What that does is it prevents you from turning off that outlet. The last thing you guys need is to accidentally turn off your router. If you accidentally turn off your router, all of this stuff goes poof. You have no more control. So either you have to roll a truck to the job site to plug that router in somewhere else, or you have to have that client do it for you, which is never a great conversation. So those mission critical devices, you can go to your outlet options and set it to network device reset only to make sure that you don't make any unwanted mistakes in some of those examples there. Big deal, makes you guys, your time and effort so much better at the end of the day. So I'm going to cover a couple more features here, then we'll get to some questions. We talked about auto reboot. This is our reboot schedule. Like I said, you have a lot of flexibility control here. Your schedule can be, say, reboot Apple TV, and I wanted to reset that outlet on repeat, say, every Sunday at 1 a.m. And so I'm just putting on a recurring schedule. Once a week on Sunday, I'm rebooting that. I want to do it every night at 1 a.m. because the client always calls me and says that Apple TV is locking up. I'm going to do a recurring reboot schedule to reboot that Apple TV every single Sunday at outlet 12 at 1 a.m. all the time. I can do a simple once in the future reboot, right? Maybe you know that there's some things that are going to happen here. They're going to have some changes. Maybe they're going to be going to, that the client has a vacation home. The system's up, but they said they're going to be there, 3 weeks from now. And so you schedule a reboot on that date 3 weeks from now so that, maybe they're going to get there on October 16th, in the afternoon. So you want to go ahead and send a nice little reboot to the system at that time. Maybe the system is off and you've turned the outlets off for them. Maybe you want to give it a nice on at that time. So you can do in the future on-off resets. You can do recurring on-offs and resets as well. Tons of scheduling options all within OvrC that you guys have access to give you that kind of control, that kind of flexibility. It's very powerful when we talk about that. And then, like I said before, OvrC Home is the ability to give your client some of that control as well. I'm not going to give you a huge demo on OvrC Home, but here's the example that I've already created. A reset Apple TV button that my client can have access to. Now that's a big deal. This button lives on my client's OvrC or OvrC Home app that's on their phones or on their tablets. And so that gives you tons of flexibility and tons of control over the system in terms of what they can do and kind of create through the system. It's super simple. You assign an icon, you go into your device list and you pick your Wattbox or any other device and you tell it what outlets you want to reboot based off of that. Any of our IP-enabled Wattboxes can take advantage of this. You give the client the control, you tell them what they can and cannot do, right? They have that access to do all of that. You're giving them all of that. And so what they get now is they get an icon in their OvrC Home apps that show them or give them that kind of control. So I'm going to bring up mine here so you guys can see what it looks like. This is my OvrC Home app here at my house. Imagine this is a client and they have a reset Apple TV button. They think it just resets the Apple TV, but maybe what you're doing is you're resetting the Apple TV, and maybe a little small controller behind that TV for your control system. You create almost like a macro behind the scenes to give them that control to go in there and fix their own problems. Again, OvrC Home is free. You have access to it. There is no need for any OvrC Pro. There is no need for anything extra. You deploy a Wattbox. You deploy that little ultra compact Wattbox for $80 to a job site, and you tell that customer, hey, next time that Apple TV locks up, do not call me. Open up your OvrC Home app and reset it yourself. I'm going to give you that control. Guys, there's so many features packed in here, right? If I go back and I look at my top 5, I think we've covered them. OvrC integration, big deal. Everything I'm showing you right now in terms of all these features, it's all in OvrC. There's no need to go to a local UI to do any configuration. It's there if you need it, but it's not needed anymore. All of this is available within the OvrC ecosystem. So I showed you already the experience with OvrC Home. If I pull up my OvrC app on my iPad here, I have all that same control we were just talking about. I have all that configuration we were just talking about. So I can go to a job site with just an iPad and deploy. I can go with just my Android phone and deploy. OvrC integration is what sets Wattbox apart from everybody else in the industry. It is such a big deal for the Wattbox experience and what it means. We built OvrC because of Wattbox. As you see my fantasy sports notifications coming in there. We built OvrC because of Wattbox. That's why it's my #1 feature that I love about Wattbox. I showed you guys how to reboot. I showed you the schedule reboots. You've seen the pictures of all the form factors. Last thing I'll show you really quick, I don't have one deployed in my house right now, is a simple example of what UPS integration looks like. You have an icon next to that Wattbox in your device list when you deploy it, and now you'll start to get battery information. How much load time is left if I go into battery backup mode? What is the current load on my unit itself, and is my battery in good health? And then I can come in and I can set which outlets have access to that battery and then do that intelligent load shedding as well. Tons of features, tons of flexibility across the board. Wattbox is such a powerful piece, guys. So you guys need to have that on your job sites. Like I said before, it was all about getting one. If you can put IP control power behind everything that needs it in your job, you've solved so much. There's no need to roll a truck anymore. Money back in your pocket. So with that being said, I'm going to take the rest of the time to answer some questions, guys. I know we powered through some stuff. We moved quickly. If you guys have more questions, please feel free to roll those in. So Steve, I think you asked a similar question to the other guys as well. Any plans for a hardwired Wattbox? So I would say that definitely thoughts and ideas around that. That's usually a realm Snap AV has stayed out of in terms of going into high voltage, and we've usually been in the low voltage realm. But with Control 4 being there and Control 4 lighting, there's definitely some ideas where we could potentially do some cool things. Jonathan, you're asking about some new accessories for the 800s and some opportunities there. If you saw there in some of my images from earlier, if you look at our fancy little 800 Wattbox you see right here, you might see this little gray port on your units. You probably have a sticker over that. We're calling that an accessory port. Features coming soon, so we have some ideas on giving you guys a lot of opportunities to expand upon what those units can do and add more features. So stay tuned, but we definitely have some thoughts to expand what you guys have access to with our new line as well. So great question there. Derek, nice to meet you, Derek. I'm Derek as well. Great question that you asked around the surge protection technology that we used within the Wattbox ecosystem. So we utilize with all of our Wattbox products an MOV-based protection method. Nothing that's state of the art in terms of the best, but it's no slouch either. When I say best of the best, there's really two main types of, I guess you would say, surge. There is surge protection and surge suppression. Surge protection is typically what you would see in an MOV-based scenario, which means that when there is a surge event, an MOV essentially clamps down on that surge event, and it is self-sacrificing in that it takes the hit so that your devices down the line don't fail. With that being said, when a surge event occurs in a Wattbox, the Wattbox will fail because of that. Then you have surge suppression types of technologies, which are designed to suppress the surge, and the unit itself should still function after that surge event. We do not use that with our Wattbox products today. We are all surge protection, which uses the MOV-based technology within our solutions. So the life expectancy of the surge protection, right, when you talk about that, the MOVs do have an expectancy in terms of how much constant voltage they can take. I don't have the number, but the spec for our MOVs is at minimum the spec of the warranty that you have with those units. So you should expect if the units were to fail based off of that, within warranty, we're always going to be there to help you out and replace that. At minimum, our MOV spec is for that. And typically when you look at an MOV spec, it's spec'd at the basically a max current through the MOV at all times. It's not really a nominal current, it's a max current at all times. So great question there, MOV based, and you can expect those to last at a minimum the warranty window for that unit, if not more, in terms of that. Jose from Bravas Indy. I think I touched on that a little bit as well. I believe I also met with some of you guys as well previously. All I can say is that stay tuned. Great question. Stay tuned. Thanks, Steve. Feel free to reach out afterwards. I'm happy to go through some of those things. Let's take a look at a couple other things here. I see some more faceplate questions, guys. Definitely looking to bring some opportunities there. So, John, the Wattbox web UI and whatnot, everything you're seeing from a Wattbox interface perspective, that's all going to be living in the OvrC ecosystem. That's where you can expect the best experience for what you get with Wattbox in terms of all the feature sets, the controls, things like that. OvrC is that experience to give you that type of ecosystem. There's still a Wattbox web UI on some of our new units, but you will find more feature sets available in the OvrC ecosystem, whether that's from your phone, your tablets, or obviously from the web interface as well. So Rob, great question on how much per outlet is supported in terms of wattage, things like that. Really, it's more of a global thing there when you look at those outlets. You shouldn't be exceeding that, but to give you an example, my desktop PC, it's a gaming PC. I have a 750 watt power supply on this. Now, do I run 750 watts all the time? No. But say when I run a game at max settings, that's pulling some serious power out of that power supply there. So you shouldn't really be seeing that in some of those scenarios. Plenty of people run 1,000 watt amps off our Wattboxes as well. So it's really more of a global type of thing you're looking at. You don't want to trip the global breaker inside of it versus an individual outlet breaker in some of those scenarios there. Great question there for sure. So great question, Steve. Can you do a on-off command within OvrC Home? So as of today, we do not have on-off inside of the OvrC Home ecosystem. It is something we are looking to building that logic into, as we speak, right? The idea is we want to make sure, and I know you guys will say, well, it's your fault if you do it wrong, but we want to make sure we have the logic and fail safes in place so that if the client does screw up and you forget to put something in place so that that can't happen. We don't want your client to turn off something they're not supposed to. The worst thing in the world is when your client goes and they try to fix their own problems and they unplug something they're not supposed to and they can't plug it back in, whatever it may be. We want to avoid those scenarios with the OvrC Home side of things. So today, we can only offer that reboot feature, but we're definitely looking to expand upon that to give you guys on-off options as well. So Bob, great question there. So as long as you have the MAC address and service tag of that unit, you should be able to get that on your OvrC account remotely if you forgot to do it when you were there. If you don't have that handy, we post that on the unit itself. We post that in the manual and on the box. If all three of those are gone and you can't get access to that, you can call our tech support team. And if you can give them, say, a reference code or when you bought that or an order number for that job, we can look that up for you and help you add that to your account. We keep track of all that information. So if you ever lose that information and you need to get it added to OvrC and you can't get there to get that added, feel free to reach out to our support teams. They can give you the MAC address and service tag of those units if you can tell us when you bought it, or if you have a reference code or whatever it may be. We can help you get those things. And if you don't have all that saved or you don't have that information, unfortunately, you'll need those two pieces, MAC address, service tag, to manually add it to that job site. So great question there, Bob. Let me take a look at some other questions that are here. Let's see. Hey, great feedback there, John, to kind of have the auto reboot, active at certain times of the day. I hear you there. So that's a great piece of feedback. What I would say for an immediate fix there is our control system API does allow you to enable and disable auto reboot from the API. So you could schedule that from your control system to turn auto reboot on and off. So if you're, example, in the middle of the night, you may not need it on. So you can say that from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. auto reboot turns off. At 6 a.m. then turn it back on. So I love that idea. I'll submit that as another example, as another option there, but as an OvrC type of feature as well. That's a great point. Same thing with in terms of that, John. That's something we're looking to build into OvrC as well, is device dependencies, so that it's not just a per device type of thing, but if you have 12 watt boxes all across your network, we should kind of have a global type of experience as well, where everything knows where it's at and they can talk. So I really, that's a great idea, and something we're looking to implement across the board with OvrC is this idea of device dependency, a living ecosystem, if it will. So I see a question that came through, and it's a great thing to ask there. What is a reset? So we categorize reset as a reboot. It's just a little bit easier terminology, but when you see reset in our settings here, a reset is a reboot. If you're looking at that in the Wattbox experience there. So reset is a reboot. Just want to make that clear if you see that and you're confused. Todd, great question. There is no way for the end user today to specify a different power on delay. Whatever power on delay you have set in the outlet options is the power on delay that the OvrC Home macro will utilize. So whatever you set is what it utilizes, and there's no way for the end user to update that information. You can put delays between different watt boxes. So if I look at one of these examples here, if I add a second device to my macro, I can put a delay between each of those. So I can say that this first watt box, it will do its commands based off these delays on that watt box. And then I move to another device, I can put a delay between devices, but nothing the end user can control. What you control is a delay on the specific Wattbox itself, and that is unique to the Wattbox, not to the command. And then you can control delays between each device in that sequence as well. Great question. Hopefully I was able to answer that there for you as well. And Peter, good question around, can multiple watt boxes be connected to a UPS? Today, the answer is no. It's a one-to-one connection, one watt box per UPS in terms of that. And then we also do not offer the ability to bring in UPS stacking. We have fixed sizes in our UPS, a fixed size in the UPS today. And so that's something that we hope to expand upon in the future, but fixed sizes and no linking of them in those types of examples as well. So I see a couple more questions I want to touch on here before I pass it back over to Gary. And I definitely want to cover this from Todd around why was the reset trigger feature dropped on the new Wattbox 12. So we kind of covered that a little bit earlier as well, Todd. But it's a great, and I may be getting to it late. But on some of our newer units, we had to make some sacrifices based off of what we were doing internally for some of those feature sets. One of those being that reset trigger and things like a new faceplate. We expect both of those to come back in the future. I mentioned that little reset or that little accessory port that you see there on the units today. We expect to, that's why we put that port there, was a new open communication port for us to build in, not just replacing some of those, but also giving you some new feature sets as well. So 100% yes, the goal is to bring those back and give some more feature sets and more flexibility options there as well. So Jonathan, I don't believe that we write any of our RTI drivers. So if you're looking for some better ones, I would encourage you to keep in contact with the RTI and push for that. Our API is open. We give access to everything every other driver has, right? So it's up to RTI to write that driver. And if I'm speaking out of turn and we wrote that driver, I apologize. But I think that RTI or a third party writes that driver for them. So I encourage you guys to loop those guys in. I know our teams at local are super looped in with those guys as well. So, and a lot of times they're on my webinar. So if any of you guys from RTI are on the webinar today, you're hearing that from some of the guys. We want to get that thing beefed up a little bit. If there's things we're missing, you know, make sure that we're aware of something our driver can't show in terms of the API. I think, guys, we're pretty close to getting to the end here. I see one little extra thing here from David Kurd around are the LEDs in the Wattbox blue? They have never been blue, David. Our LEDs have always been green. So hopefully you're using Wattbox and not someone else's, because our LEDs have always been green on the Wattbox product line. We have some blue LEDs in the Arachnus ecosystem, but Wattbox LEDs have always been green.
Cool.
With that being said, guys, I'm going to pass it over to Gary, give the reins back to him. I am going to drop in my email here. I always like to give my email out. So if you guys have further questions that I wasn't able to answer today, please feel free to reach out. I try to do my best to get access and answered all of them, but I'm going to pass it back to Gary, and I'll pop my email up here for you guys if you want to ask any more questions to me.